How come there isn't like a Linkin Park of the millennial generation? I was listening to my CD here and I thought we really got screwed over by the changes in consumer behaviors and technology in a way that no other generation before us was affected. And sure, there were changes in technology before then. There was MTV killing the radio star, but did it really? I mean, if anything, MTV helped the previous generations in a way that benefited those generations. But by the time millennials got out of high school and went on to pursue their music dreams, MTV was no longer playing music. They were not playing videos anymore. It was the rise of the reality show, and they were at the forefront of all the shows that had a huge fan base, but it did not serve the music community at all. And up until then, MTV was a huge driver of success for bands. If you think about the generation right before millennials, I would say that's like the young Gen X. Some may even call them older millennials, but I don't think so. I think this really is like what divides millennials and whatever came before them. Probably the zillennials. Is that how they call them? Is that a word? Zillennials, like borderline millennial and Gen X. But bands like Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, 3 Days, what is it? 3 Days Grace, 3 Doors Down, all those bands that made it in right before the change, the huge change of no MTV, no radio. And we say, what do you mean no radio? The radio's still around. No, no, it isn't. Up until then, the radio would break artists because they were like independent and they had talented VJs, DJs that cared about the industry, that cared about music, that were musicians themselves, and they broke big bands. One of the biggest examples I can think of is the Goo Goo Dolls. Everybody thinks that it was Iris, the big hit, the big breakout, but it was Name. And Name was, that song that goes, you know what song I'm talking about. It's called Name. And that song wasn't even a single on that record, but some DJ, I don't wanna get the name wrong, but I think it was in California, could have been K-Rock, not sure about that, but he loved the song Name. He recognized it as a great song and started playing it, and then everyone recognized it as the great song and started requesting it, and all of a sudden, Name is this huge breakout song for the Goo Goo Dolls. By the time millennials were out and about, cutting their demos, going on tour, doing the local struggling artist thing, the radio stations had consolidated and were no longer this independent businesses around the country that had DJs who had autonomy to play whatever music they liked or whatever artists they wanted to break and support. By the time millennials got into the business, I mean, business because they never made it into the business. By the time millennials needed the support of the radio, of radio stations around the country, all those radio stations had consolidated into, I think, one or two huge companies that absorbed every radio station that was struggling. All the radio stations started taking orders from one giant boss, Clear Channel, and the other one I think was Viacom. But all of a sudden, you were in the middle of Florida, in the middle of Texas, in the middle of California, in the middle of Massachusetts, and the rock station was playing the same music. There was no independent editor in chief that would say, "Let's play this, let's play that, let's give this artist a chance. People want to hear this." Whatever it was, whatever you went, you would hear Metallica, Linkin Park, System of a Down, Disturbed, the same bands that were making it big since like 1999, 2000, 2001. By the time millennials were out of high school in 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, those radio stations were still playing bands that people were requesting in 1999, 2000, 2001. I mean, even till today, I wouldn't be surprised if you turn your rock station in your town, wherever you are. I mean, if you happen to have access to, just go online right now and look up your local radio station and see what they played in the last, the last 10 songs they played, and tell me in the comments if you don't see Linkin Park, 3 Days Grace, System of a Down, Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, which bands that I love. I love all those bands. Some of them more than others. But what I'm saying is, like, each generation had its radio industry that promoted the next generation. Like in the 90s, all those bands I just mentioned, Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, Stone Temple Pilots, Soundgarden, all the big ones and all the little ones that, kind of have faded into history, they had the support of radio stations. The radio stations of their time weren't stopped playing 80s. Sure, maybe they play some of the hits, maybe they still play Van Halen, but they weren't just, like I said, when you go right now, go into on Google and search for your local radio station and see what they played recently and put it in the comments. Don't give me like the one new band that they're playing, like Bad Omens or Sleep Token. Let me know if you see Metallica, Linkin Park, Nirvana, any of the usual suspects in there. I guarantee it, because I've lived this. I have done this. I have lived this experience myself. I played in a band right out of high school. It was my dream when I was, since middle school, and I started playing the guitar. And by the time I got out, I noticed this. And I've talked too long about the radio station, but we talked about MTV, also music magazines. Since whenever the industry started, I don't know when, the 60s, the 70s, they may have been around in the 50s with Elvis Presley and all the jazz people back then. But Rolling Stone magazine, what was the other one? See, we can't even recall the big magazine name, because they have, for us millennials, they don't mean anything. But up until our time, Rolling Stone magazine was huge for music. Rolling Stone magazine still exists and still huge, and they feature celebrities and this and that. But it's a shell of what it used to be. It's just a brand now. Some big corporation owns it because of the brand power that it drives. Spin magazine, I believe, was one of the other big ones. Revolver. And then there were some little ones that were starting to emerge, like they used to back in the day. I mean, the magazine stand, the magazine rack anywhere used to be huge. Tons of options. And I remember when I was in high school, Amp magazine, and God, I wish I remember the name of the other one. But Amp magazine was a pretty cool indie magazine that featured all the artists that Rolling Stone wouldn't feature, because they only did like Nirvanas and Linkin Parks. But Amp magazine was really cool, I remember, and you could buy a Hot Topic, and it was getting bigger, and then you could buy at Walmart. And then all of a sudden, the rise of MySpace kind of killed, I mean, the rise of the internet kind of killed the magazines, the magazine industry in general. And by the time millennials got out, the rise of the indie magazine never translated into a big mainstream publication like they did in the past. So millennial bands didn't have print magazines either. So those are huge, three huge outlets for promotion that were completely removed from the equation: magazines, radio, MTV. But it didn't end there, because with the rise of MySpace and the iPod, which came out the iPhone came out in 2007, but before that, we already had iTunes and the iPod. And for the first time, the CD sales started dwindling, to the point that the entire industry collapsed in a short span. I mean, within a couple of years. Tower Records, Virgin Records, these huge institutions that commanded so much power in the industry, collapsed. And millennial bands were trying to sell CDs, because at the time, the emerging new market, the new way of consuming music through streaming, did not exist yet. It was forming like a diamond in the rough that's miles underground, beneath tons of dirt and rock. At that time, everyone was uploading their music to MySpace, and that was the only place where fans would stream music, and none of it was monetized. You could not monetize it. It wasn't an option anymore. Like, everybody was happy to give it away for free because you couldn't, have your fans request it at the radio station, and at the time, no one could record music videos because it was, like, super expensive. The technology wasn't there yet for indie bands, for garage bands, for amateur bands. I mean, even bands that were signed to small indie labels could not dream of being on MTV because MTV had already turned their back on musicians, on music. If they play music, it was Metallica, Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, occasionally Van Halen, and some of the big ones. But think about the profit margin that disappeared when the CD disappeared. Because the CD was the peak of technology for profit margins. It was the best of all cases. I mean, up until then, we had records and cassettes that were, a physical thing, it required more materials. And recording into a cassette, if the song was, I don't know, 3-minute song, it took 3 minutes to record it into a cassette. The records, it's even a bigger physical expense. And you have the case for the record, the case for the CD, the packaging, all that. But by the time it got to the CD, the profit margin was so good that even a local band, an amateur garage band, could make their own CD. And I remember when I was in a band, we would order CDs just like 100 at a time at the very beginning. And it would cost like $1.50 per CD with the jewel case, with the little book in there, full color print, and we could sell that for anywhere. I mean, it would be cheap if we sold it for $7, and that's like a 700% margin. Don't fact check me on the math, but the average was like $10, and if you were having a good night or a good season, a good summer, you could sell those for 13, 14, $15 when it only costs you $1.50. But that's when we, as a local band that would only order 100 units, we would give $1.50 per unit rate. But the big labels, yeah, because I remember when I would try to place an order of CDs for my band, it would give me the options. Well, if you ordered 1,000 CDs, now you can get it for $1.10. And if you ordered 10,000 CDs, you can get it for 95 cents. And if you order 100,000 CDs, it would be like 70 cents. And then if you need more than that, call for a rate. So up until then, everyone in the 90s into the early 2000s, before the collapse of the industry, God, I would like to know what was the rate that someone like Metallica, Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park was getting when they were printing out 1,000,000 CDs. Like, they were probably printing those CDs for like 25 cents and selling it for $18, $20. What is the math there? I mean, that's like crazy return. And that's why Rockstars had so much money until the millennial generation, and that's why millennial rock stars don't exist, because there are many millennial bands that are great, super talented, that did get signed to whatever record label wanted to support them, and there are hits out there, but there is no Linkin Park of the millennial generation. There is no Foo Fighters of the millennial generation. But there are super talented millennials out there, artists and bands, incredibly talented. In fact, I am one of the biggest examples of how the industry failed to secure millennial talent or to support millennial talent is Dead Sarah. And some of you may be familiar with Dead Sarah, and some of you be like, who? Well, the new singer in Linkin Park, Emily, she is phenomenally talented, and her band is great. Dead Sarah had been rocking it since right out of high school. Around, because I've seen videos going back to like 2006, 2007, and that girl was incredibly talented back then, and she did get recognition. The band was recognized at the indie level, and throughout the years, they just had no label support or industry support. They did get some record deals with some small labels, but the industry had no money and no way to support it, because even if you had the money, even if you had some crazy rich guy that wanted to burn through his entire family fortune and just fund everything for a millennial band, There was no record stores, there was no radio, there was no MTV. And all of a sudden, the labels and the little there is of the industry and the radio and MTV, they're just betting on the sure thing, which is we gotta play more Metallica, we gotta play more Linkin Park, we gotta play more Limp Bizkit, we gotta play more System of a Down, Disturbed, Smashing Pumpkins, all that. And don't get me wrong, I love those bands. All those bands I just named, the reason they're in the brain is because I love those bands. But like I said, Dead Sarah was like hustling and grinding, doing tours. In like 2006 and 2007, you can find videos of Dead Sarah playing with Skrillex when Skrillex was huge, and opening up for The Offspring, and they're bringing out Sarah to sing with The Offspring, and I mean they did everything, not just right. They did everything and they had the talent, especially I'm gonna say Emily is a force of nature in music. Her voice is just so good, which is why, Mike Shinoda recognized that and they that's why Linkin Park is back. And this is not about, Linkin Park, but it's just so nice to see that one of us made it. Because I think Emily is the only one out of the millennials who made it into that stratosphere of rock. Like she is Linkin Park is probably the last legendary rock band because after that, like the industry collapsed and it took like 15 years for the new industry to settle for for streaming to be monetized. But by the time all this happened, it's been like 10, 15 years. Is Gen Z's turn now. And sure, now we old millennials can go do it, but we know it's not the same. That there's a time, there's a window in the universe for that teenage angst and for that discovering the way of the world and the way of the heart and the way of pain and the struggles and all that that get translated and transponded into music through music, and it's that symbiotic exchange between the listener and the creator, the fans and the band. We millennials, we played it. I mean, we lived it. We just didn't cash in on it. We didn't get paid for it, and we didn't receive our flowers. And it's why I love the new chapter in Linkin Park because not just for as a fan of Linkin Park, back since Hybrid Theory, this is my original 2001 CD or 2000. I think I got this in 2000. But one of us made it. And, I love Emily. I love her voice. And the fans love her. So anyone that hasn't really been following and thinks Linkin Park should have changed their name and just it's a new band, whatever. It's not. The fans that have been around since 2000, 98% of them gave her a chance, and the concerts are sold out, whether it's a stadium or not. People are enjoying it, so let us enjoy it because the music is good. I mean, the Emptiness Machine is a great song. It's just so nice to see that one of us made it because I can't really think of anyone else. There's been so many bands that were so good and so big at Warped Tour, and those guys are, like, not even playing anymore, like, everyone had to, like, go become a realtor or go back to school or just figure something out. Everyone had to pivot away from music, and even the bands that did not pivot, they had to really hustle to, like, stay in the business, and I have no idea what kind of money they're making, like, I'm talking about the big ones, like, I think Under Oath should have been the Linkin Park of our generation. And somehow Under Oath it's some people around now right now might be like, "Who?" I mean, if the audience is millennials, Under Oath. But why is Under Oath not huge by now? Because they are so good. And whenever they go on tour, like, they have huge crowds, and their music is just so good, and it was revolutionary in the sense that it was a new sound. It was the sound of the next generation. And I remember getting the Rolling Chasing Safety album my senior year. My girlfriend at the time, she gave it to me as a gift and I'd listen to that all the time then. And and that's when Under Oath was kinda, like, breaking out and becoming popular and kinda, like, really, like, going mainstream, but not, like, mainstream in what we know as mainstream, but, like, in MySpace. They were, like, big on MySpace and in the scene, especially on the East Coast. I mean, going to an Under Oath show anywhere in Florida, I was like madness. It was I'm so glad I saw that twice in that time period. But like I said, there was supposed to be an upward trajectory that never continued to go upward. It's like whenever I go on their YouTube channel, I'm just like appalled by the numbers on the subscribers and the views. And it's not for lack of effort. They put out content that it's great. It sounds amazing. As a Skylit Drive. A Skylit Drive was so big. I remember, like, first it, like, blew up on MySpace, and then they were, like, the biggest band on Warped Tour the next year, and there was no next step for them to go because the industry was not supporting any of this. I mean, I just realized it was so bad that Warped Tour ceased to exist. Warped Tour was an institution since the '90s that never stopped getting bigger, and at some point, it was just like, I remember there was an article from the owner of the Warped Tour, Kevin Lyman, that the scene had become elitist or something like that, where, like, it was just a bunch of, like, politics where, like, people were telling him, "Hey, you shouldn't have that band," or "You should have that band." I'm sure the article still exists there on the internet, and I'm glad the Warped Tour is coming back and rock music is coming back. In a way, I think it's because Linkin Park came back. They brought rock back with them. Because up until then, you saw, like, the reunion tours with, like, Creed and Limp Bizkit, but once Linkin Park hit this scene with Emily, it was just like, rock is back. It was, like, the most exciting thing that had happened in rock music in, like, 20 years. Definitely, like, in the last decade. I mean, I remember Marilyn Manson was doing an interview, like, 10 years ago talking about rock is dead, and people say rock is dead, and it did kinda feel like that, and now it doesn't, and now it seems like because the new world order of how we consume music, it may never die again. It feels like now Deftones is bigger than ever before. Like, some of the younger kids and the Gen Z generation love Deftones, and it's like, yes, and, like, Deftones is one of the old it's not a millennial band. The Deftones, I remember, I mean, they were late '90s or mid '90s, so all those bands that made it before the industry changed and collapsed, made it big. You didn't have to be Metallica size to 30 years later still be relevant, like the Deftones. But, it's gonna be really hard for, millennial bands, the ones that barely made it through, to have that relevance 30 years from now. I hope maybe Gen Alpha will discover them. Maybe Gen Z will, maybe the MySpace scene will have a renaissance, but I don't think so. I I think the millennial generation is a tragic story of a missed opportunity of a but it wasn't even a missed opportunity. It was just the ground collapsed beneath us and it swallowed all the talent that existed in this generation because many bands, many artists didn't get didn't get to it. They didn't get to shine. They disappeared before they existed. And on that note, just want to let you know that this video is not sponsored by Squarespace or Bluetooth or ZipRecruiter or any of the usual suspects because this is my first video. And if you made it this far, you may be the first subscriber or the first one to hit the like button or the dislike button. Is the dislike button still active? Does it even work? Hit it because I want to know what your thoughts are about this. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments. We'll catch you later.